Mr. Warnock, aye.
On this vote, the yeas are 51, the nays 44, and the motion is agreed to. senator from Illinois is recognized.
Are we in a quorum call?
We are not.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I was fortunate early in my political life to meet several people who became my heroes and mentors and led me to take up public service as my life's calling. The first was a senator from Illinois named Paul Douglas, and I met him when I was a college intern in his office. And he introduced me to a man named Paul Simon. Simon, who was a lieutenant governor in our state legislator, a congressman, and ultimately the senator who preceded me in this Senate seat. After Paul Simon passed away, I approached his family and talked about a tribute to him. And they basically said, well, you remember Paul. He would have been the last person in the world who ever wanted a statue and really didn't care much about having anything with his name on it. That just wasn't his approach to politics. But I thought to myself, there were some things that he valued that maybe I can try to help in my own way in his memory. And one of them was in 2014 when I introduced a bill called the Paul Simon Water for the World Act. Simon had written a book that didn't make the New York Times bestseller list. It was entitled Tapped Out. And he had a theory many years ago that the issue of the 21st century was going to be water. And he made a pretty convincing case, and frankly, the events and evidence since then have backed him up. So this bill, the Paul Simon Water for the World Act, was designed to build on the success of an earlier effort called Paul Simon's Water for the Poor, which had passed 10 years before and sought to bring clean water and sanitation programs to the world's poorest communities. Today, as we mark World Water Day, I want to recognize what we've accomplished with these two pieces of legislation. They have helped provide for the first time access to clean drinking water and sanitation for more than 60 million people around the globe. Those successes have also improved global health, economic development, and educational attainment. And they've proven how far just a little federal funding invested in the right area can go. Both of those laws were passed on a bipartisan basis, and in recognizing the compounding benefits of clean water and sanitation, Congress has sustained the programs. My staff has traveled to countries like Kenya, Ghana, Senegal to see these programs in action. They've shared stories and photos with me about schools and villages for the very first time have access to clean, drinkable water. In Ghana, for example, these laws have helped fund something called the Digni Lu program. It has provided rural villagers with clean, sustainable toilets and helped eliminate waterborne diseases in entire districts of the country. This World Water Day, I hope we can reaffirm our commitment in this Senate to supporting legislation in the name of my friend and mentor, the Senator Paul Simon Water for the World Act, that will help bring global health for years to come. And now, Mr. President, I ask that the next statement be placed at a separate part in the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a few days, America's eyes will turn toward the Senate Judiciary Committee as we begin the process of considering Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson for her nomination to the Supreme Court. It's going to be a historic moment on Monday as Judge Jackson appears before the committee. Gaveling the hearing to order as chair of the committee will rank as one of the highest honors of my career in Congress. Next week, the American people will have a chance to meet Judge Jackson, learn about her professional record, and her life experience. But for now, let me briefly share a few things that have impressed me the most. By now, I'm sure many have heard about her experience. Judge Jackson has clerked at every level of the federal judiciary. Most lawyers would consider a clerkship in any court as an achievement that they could brag about for years. She served as a clerk at every level of the federal judiciary, including the Supreme Court. She served in many roles in the courtroom as a public defender, a lawyer in private practice, and a district and circuit court judge at the federal level. She was confirmed by the Senate unanimously to serve on the U.S. Sentencing Commission, and she would be the first justice since Thurgood Marshall with considerable criminal defense experience. Her qualifications are exceptional. In every role she's held, she has earned a reputation for thoughtfulness, even-handedness, and collegiality. And just as impressive as Judge Jackson's record is her character and temperament. Humble, personable, she's dedicated herself to making our legal system more understandable and more accessible for everyone who came in her courtroom. Finally, of course, there's the perspective that Judge Jackson will bring to the High Court. Over the course of its history, 115 justices have served on the Supreme Court. If she's confirmed, Judge Jackson will be the 116th, but she would be the first Supreme Court justice who is the daughter of parents who felt the crushing oppression of segregation, and the first justice who has represented the indigent as a public defender. Judge Jackson also comes from a law enforcement family, has a deep appreciation for the risk of police officers, like her brother and uncles, and I believe one served on the Baltimore Police Department. Indeed, with Judge Jackson's confirmation, the Supreme Court would come closer to fully reflecting the diversity of America. When Justice Breyer announced his retirement, I promised that the process for confirming his successor would be fair and timely. Well, it has been. For instance, the committee sent a bipartisan committee questionnaire to Judge Jackson. In response, she provided materials that shed considerable light on her record, her accomplishments, her writings, her legal reasoning. Notably, this included more than 12,000 pages of public records from Judge Jackson's time on the Sentencing Commission. The committee also sent a bipartisan document request to the Obama Presidential Library. That request sought documents relating to Judge Jackson's nomination to both the Sentencing Commission and the United States District Court for the District of Columbia. In response to that request, the Obama Library produced more than 70,000 pages of material. Additionally, Judge Jackson has written hundreds of opinions, almost 600 now, which provide extensive insight into her legal philosophy. In short, the committee has all the information it needs to evaluate Judge Jackson's qualifications to sit on the Supreme Court. We've had to send a lot of follow-up requests for information, too. She always responded in a timely way. So we're going to proceed with her hearing come Monday. This process will provide committee members an opportunity to question Judge Jackson, to learn more about her approach to judicial decision-making, her views on precedent, her record, on and off the bench. Here's how the hearing is going to work. Each member of the committee will be allocated 10 minutes to make opening statements. Each member will have a total of 50 minutes to question Judge Jackson. There are 22 members of the committee. If you do the math, there's plenty of opportunity for questions to be asked and answered. I expect it to be a substantive hearing. I expect members on both sides of the aisle to ask tough but fair questions and to give her an appropriate time to respond. And I expect that the committee will diligently perform our role in the Senate's advise and consent function. When the hearing is complete, I believe the American public will be keenly aware of just what an outstanding nominee Judge Jackson is. They'll also get to see what I've seen in meeting with her personally. She's thoughtful, brilliant, kind, and has a good sense of humor. She's already inspired young people across the country, young people who are just beginning to discover their passion for law. You see, she graduated from Miami's Palmetto Senior High School, a public high school in Pinecrest, Florida. Right now, the halls of Palmetto High are buzzing with pride in anticipation for next week's hearing. One school administrator told my office that even though the students will be out on spring break next week during the beach season in Florida, many will be coming together for a virtual watch party as Judge Jackson appears before our committee. The administrator said that many of these students see themselves in Judge Jackson, particularly the members of the speech and debate team, which Judge Jackson once was a member of herself. In fact, Judge Jackson has cited her time on the speech and debate team as one of the most formative experiences of her life. She described it as, quote, the one activity that best prepared me for future success. Well, today, Judge Jackson is more prepared than perhaps anyone to serve on the Supreme Court. So to all the students at Palmetto High who are following in her footsteps, working long hours to hone their rhetorical skills, you're on the right track. While Judge Jackson may be the first Palmetto Panther to serve on the Supreme Court, there's no reason why she should be the last. Years from now, who knows, maybe one of you will be preparing for your hearing before this same committee. Until then, you should all be so proud of Judge Jackson. And Mr. President, I'd like to add another element to this, a personal element. When I spoke to Judge Jackson about her family, she's naturally proud of her husband, who is a surgeon. But she talked about her two daughters and showed them pictures of them. They're teenagers and obviously good kids. She's so proud of them. She told the story that when there was a vacancy announced on the Supreme Court several years ago, one of her daughters picked up a pen and wrote a personal letter to President Obama, said, "Why don't you pick my mom?" It's that kind of support every parent lives for, and it means a lot to her. She's a good person, a good mother, a good parent, and she'll be a great member of the Supreme Court. I also want to say that there are elements that obviously the public has paid attention to. This being the fourth time before the Senate Judiciary Committee, many people in America know Judge Jackson, or they've heard about her, or they've read about her. They believe in a positive way that she will bring diversity to the court, that she has the experience that's necessary to serve effectively, that she'll uphold our constitutional values of liberty, equality, and justice. She'll protect the constitutional rights of everybody, not just the wealthy and powerful. She has ethics and integrity, and she will place justice before politics. I'm looking forward to this hearing. I'm happy that the Republicans have said publicly that they want to make it a respectful hearing, and I certainly hope they live up to that. I'll do everything I can to convince the Democratic side to aspire to the same goal. This could be an historic moment for America in the selection of this justice. I hope that the Senate Judiciary Committee rises to the occasion, and I have confidence that it will. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Nevada is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today in support of the nominations of Judge Christina Silva and Professor Ann Traum, nominees to serve on the U.S. District Court for the District of Nevada. Both nominees have built tremendous careers and legal reputations, and last night, cloture was invoked on both of these nominees with strong bipartisan support. Judge Silva has spent the bulk of her career as a federal prosecutor in the city of Las Vegas, where she served as chief of the criminal division. In this role, Judge Silva oversaw all criminal investigations and prosecutions in the Nevada U.S. Attorney's Office. She's gained vast experience dealing with federal criminal trials, including violent criminal cases, civil rights violations, and cybercrime. And since 2019, Judge Silva has served with distinction as a Nevada State Court judge, where she has earned the respect and admiration of her colleagues, as well as those who have appeared before her in court. Colleagues have called her, and I quote, intellectually gifted and extremely hardworking, end quote, and have commended her, and I'll quote again, deep commitment to the rule of law. These are exactly the kinds of qualities we need in someone nominated to serve on the federal bench. And they are the qualities that Judge Silva exemplifies. I know she will serve with independence and integrity. For her part, Professor Ann Traum has also developed a distinguished legal career, one rich with examples of her commitment to the law and to public service. She has litigated civil cases with the U.S. Attorney's Office, served as a Department of Justice trial attorney, and has worked for years on criminal cases as a federal public defender. Since 2008, Professor Traum has dedicated her career to helping shape the minds of Nevada's future lawyers as a professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas Boyd School of Law. A deeply admired teacher, Professor Traum has gone above and beyond, founding a clinic to provide legal services to parties in Las Vegas who lack resources, and volunteering significant time to pro bono programs in Southern Nevada. Professor Ann Traum has worked to ensure that all individuals have adequate representation to defend their rights, that all individuals have access to our justice system. And there is no better way to judge a professor than by the opinion of her students. In Professor Traum's case, her students regularly credit her courses as the most important courses in their legal careers. The Bipartisan Judicial Selection Committee that Senator Catherine Cortez Masto and I put together fully vetted both of these nominees. And we both worked hand in hand with the White House to ensure that they were chosen for their exemplary qualifications, intellect, and passion for the law. I was glad to see that both Professor Traum and Judge Silva's nominations received bipartisan support, both as they advanced through the Senate Judiciary Committee and during last night's cloture vote. These highly qualified nominees for the U.S. District Court are fully deserving of your support now, and I urge each of my colleagues to vote for their confirmation next week. Nevada's federal district court has been under enormous strain, with delays driving up costs to businesses and individuals pursuing their claims in court. Filling the vacancies with these nominees would ensure that Nevadans have fair and reasonable access to federal courts. It is time to confirm these nominees, and I urge all of my colleagues to vote in favor of Judge Christina Silva and Professor Ann Traum. Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. President.
The senator from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the challenges we face in this era of great power competition is identifying unique threats before they escalate. When it comes to Russia and Ukraine, these threats have come into full focus. Vladimir Putin took off his statesman costume and declared a war of choice on Ukraine. Last week, we received the first public allegations of his intent to unleash Syrian proxies on anyone still standing between his war machine and the territory he covets. I'm glad to hear more of my colleagues speaking up about the unique dangers of proxy wars. Last week, I laid out in detail how Putin has used proxies to install himself in countries that are leadership poor but resource rich. We know that fighters from the Kremlin-backed Wagner Group have slaughtered their way through Africa and the Middle East on behalf of Putin's grand Soviet ambition, and now he's going to do the very same thing in Ukraine. We've also seen Iran unleash proxies and state-sponsored terror organizations in Iraq against American armed forces and against civilian populations in Lebanon, Yemen, and Gaza. In their 2022 threat assessment, the intelligence community stated, and I quote, "We assess that Iran will threaten U.S. persons directly and via proxy attacks, particularly in the Middle East," end quote. This is a public statement. This is the annual threat assessment. It is backed by years of evidence proving that Iran has done this before and they're going to try to do it again. President Biden should be doing everything in his power to keep this threat as far away from American citizens as he can. But no such luck. The impending nuclear deal he's trying to hand Tehran unlocks billions of dollars for Iranian banks, companies, and other entities that finance violence. Where does the White House think that money will end up? We know there's nothing Tehran loves more than a power vacuum. They've invested heavily in Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Hamas, all terror organizations hunkered down in some of the world's most unstable regions. Over the past decade, the Iranians have spent more than $16 million on carefully targeted bloodshed. That's right, Madam President. Iran alone, the largest state sponsor of terrorism. The landscape is chaos, and still the Biden administration is pushing the world toward a sanctions relief scheme that would empower the Iranians to terrorize and subjugate even more people. The regime in Tehran is a menace. This week, incoming CENTCOM commander General Kurilla said as much in his confirmation hearing when we asked him how sanctions relief would affect the Iranian influence. And I'm quoting him, "There is a risk with sanctions relief that Iran will use some of that money to support its proxies in terrorism in the region. And if it did, it could increase risk to our forces in the region," end quote. This week's CENTCOM posture review before the Armed Services Committee, outgoing Commander General McKenzie acknowledged these concerns about sanctions relief, saying, and I quote, "There is a risk that they could use that money in ways that we would not want them to use that money. That is right," end quote. We certainly don't want them to put one more penny toward those proxy wars for good reasons. First, proxies don't just parachute in and declare victory. They brutalize entire populations and use weapons that these hostile regimes wouldn't normally have access to. Second, because proxies operate outside the law, the rogue regimes that hire them maintain plausible deniability. Third, this plausible deniability creates a false sense of security that allows hostile governments to pull up a chair to the negotiating table and pretend to fit in with normal countries, all the while denying the U.S. access and placement. We have a limited number of ways to deter hostile regimes from waging war on the civilized world. The West failed the people of Ukraine in this regard, but it's not too late to change course. Ronald Reagan once said, and I'm quoting him, "War comes not when the forces of freedom are strong, but when they are weak. It is then that tyrants are tempted," end quote. He believed in achieving peace through strength, and so do I. It's pretty simple. If you don't stand up for yourself, you'll get run over, and if you don't stand up for your friends, there may not be anyone left to help them when the wolves are actually at the door. When I talk to Tennesseans about this, the one thing they want to know is why President Biden makes decisions that make this country more vulnerable and less safe. Whether through lifting sanctions on Iran, slow-walking sanctions on Russia, or keeping our economy entangled with China's, Biden has refused to lead. Forget doing what needs to be done. He won't even say what needs to be said. He's fearful, and he is scared to anger the new axis of evil. He's scared to anger one more timid ally in Europe. He's scared to anger the radical left here at home. Is there anything that he is not afraid of? He is so weak-kneed in the face of adversity that he can't even bring himself to finish building the fence that would secure our southern border. I want to focus on that border security for just a few minutes because while Russia and Iran might dominate headlines, for Tennesseans, our wide-open southern border is a perfect example of what can happen when a president concedes national security to score points on his political rivals. Border encounters were up in February. That's almost 165,000 people trying to enter the country unnoticed. 76% of the people the Border Patrol caught were single adults. Cocaine seizures increased to 83%, meth 97%, heroin 173%. We know for a fact that terrorists and members of international criminal organizations cross our border with impunity. Over the course of 3 days last December, Border Patrol arrested a guerrilla member of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, 4 MS-13 gang members, and an 18th Street gang member. Madam President, six distinguished representatives from the most dangerous gangs in the entire world, and they almost disappeared into the country undetected. Thank goodness for law enforcement, because these are not ordinary criminals. In January of 2021, the Department of Justice indicted the 14 most senior members of MS-13 on charges of conspiracy to support, finance, and commit acts of terrorism. Is this the Biden doctrine? Choosing vulnerability over security, annihilation through weakness, and who exactly does the president intend to win over with this approach? Ukraine will find no peace in the easing of diplomatic tensions on some UN panel. Children in Africa won't have a future if we start writing checks to proxy fighters. The people of El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras won't be better off if we enable the drug dealers and sex traffickers who make a living exploiting their families. No matter where in the world you look, you can see the cost of Joe Biden's willful blindness to danger. He has the tools he needs to protect the United States from these threats. Now he needs to use them. It's time to stop relying on foreign oil and make the country energy independent again. Finish the Keystone Pipeline. Do an Operation Warp Speed for energy. Allow oil and gas exploration on federal land. We have to stop leading from behind when it comes to preventing Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. President Biden must submit any deal with Iran to Congress. And rest assured, we will block implementation of anything the White House tries to sneak under the radar. We must pay attention to the flow of money and power in proxy hotbeds and recognize the danger posed by these terrorists for hire. And we can't neglect security threats close to home. It's time to secure the border and give our law enforcement officials the resources they need to catch terrorists and gang members before they disappear into the country. Tennesseans can't identify with the president's refusal to lead. They're confused and frightened, but they also have faith in our ability as a country to pull out of this skid. They believe in the promise of America. All they want is for their president and elected leaders to prove that they also believe in this country. I yield the floor.